Claire Jones, welcome to Beyond Stage Fright. Now, you're a harpist and you've performed as soloist with many international orchestras. You've been the official harpist for the Prince of Wales, and in 2011 you performed for the royal wedding. I can imagine that was quite a high pressure event. How did you manage with the stress that comes along with that kind of a performance?
Well, I think with any high-pressured event, you definitely need to do some sort of preparation, really. In terms of being a performer, the most important aspect for me personally is the mental aspect. It really is really important to me to visualise the situation before I actually get to it. So when I'm doing all my hours of practice in my study, I definitely do sit there and I think through exactly what's going to happen, even if it's just to do with, I know what time the performance will be or how long it'll be, I know exactly which pieces I'm going to play, so I'll run through it like I would do in the actual performance. For example, another high-pressured gig I had to do was in the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff for 75,000 people. Well, you definitely have to prepare mentally for something like that, because as a performer, you don't always get the chance to play to that many people. So it's really important that you feel you can give of your best if your mind is in the right place at the right time. So I definitely did try and imagine all the surroundings, but particularly in Buckingham Palace for the royal wedding, it was a magnificent sight, and it was just a wonderful experience all round for me in my position as royal harpist at the time. And it was the last event that I did for His Royal Highness as his harpist, Prince Charles then. So it really helped me internationally also to launch my career.
Yes, because lots of things came as a result of that, didn't it? And you just had so many opportunities. How did you manage all of that? This sudden intense flurry of performances that you were giving.
In terms of travelling and different pressures there are on musicians, I think it's important to remember that this, obviously mentally it's quite draining to obviously go from one performance to another, but physically it's quite draining as well. Obviously there's a lot of intense practice and lots of hours of repetitive strain that go into practicing, as every musician will always know, or every performer will know. And for me personally, I put a lot of those hours in, during my childhood, my teenage years, my early college years. But things did start to catch up with me actually between the years of 2010 and 2013, because I did start to get quite significant symptoms actually, those being episodes of fatigue and also pain throughout the body. And these types of symptoms I thought must have been caused by probably playing so much, all the time, and obviously I was exerting myself quite a lot to be travelling constantly to different, countries. Obviously, I put quite a lot of pressure on myself. Sometimes I do 3-day trips to Hong Kong, sort of go there, step off the plane, do the concert and rehearsal, and then come back again and then do another concert in the UK. And I went from one thing to another, like a treadmill really. I'm travelling at 100 miles an hour, and being the person I am, I'm quite a perfectionist and quite ambitious. I just didn't want to say no. I just wanted to enjoy riding the wave and not stop and just soak it all up. And I was fortunate to do that for a long, long time. But these symptoms kept increasing over the years, unfortunately, and it ended up in me getting lots of migraines and headaches and things as well. So then we got to the point of 2013 where really my life really changed dramatically. So in May 2013, I was diagnosed with ME, and it came to this because I came back from a tour in America and I literally couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything. I felt, I just actually talking was actually too much of a strain, which sounds quite silly really at the moment, but it really was such a hard time that I wasn't able to lift my arms to play. And so Chris, my husband, had to take me into hospital. And unfortunately I had a seizure, and they kept me in for quite some time just to see what was going on with my body. And later that day, the consultant came in and he said, look, this is chronic fatigue, ME, and this means you really do have to really listen to what your body's saying to you right now. So they sent me home, and at the time, I don't think it all dawned on me exactly what was going to happen in the next few months. It was quite surreal at the time, because going from a person who was busy doing everything you can be doing, going from one kind of stress to another when it comes to performances. Quite nice stress in some situations, of course, when you're on stage and adrenaline's pumping. But then, going to then not being able to actually do anything, my body screaming at me to stop, basically. And it was a real life-changing experience. I came home and my family then had to care for me. And they decided that I should go back to my parents' home in Wales, just because I needed absolute full-time care. I couldn't really wash or sort of feed myself. I was so weak, I didn't have any energy whatsoever. And that was where everything changed, really. Chris was back and forth, my husband, back and forth from London to Wales constantly, because obviously we needed him to keep working. And my parents took care of me full time, and I was there for several months, and I just needed that full-time attention. And to begin with, I think psychologically it was quite tough to deal with, because the first thing we had to do was cancel everything. So we had to literally stop tours in Moscow, in Abu Dhabi, in the UK. And in my mind, I think the biggest fear I had was letting people down, because I felt clients and promoters and different people had booked me years in advance, and all of a sudden I couldn't really tell them exactly what was going on, really, because it's a very difficult illness to explain. It's not fully understood across the board, although many people do suffer from it. And so it was really tricky, but obviously, very, very kindly, most people were all very, very understanding and knew that I wasn't well enough to do the performances. And from there on, as soon as then things were cancelled and I had the time really to give myself to get better and the rest that I needed and the recuperation that I needed, that's when my body just started to heal. And that journey of healing and recovery has taken me near on 2 years to get better. But in terms of that recovery, it was in very different stages, really. It constantly changed along those 2 years. And it started with a period of just calm and relaxation, where I just literally had to get my body from being in a very high stress state. Because as you know, as musicians, it's very easy to go from one performance to the next to the next. And what I was doing is, I didn't quite realise it, I was getting into a very stressed state for each performance. Without me knowing, although I'm not really that nervous when it comes to performing, and I take it in my stride pretty much. I've had experience, it comes with time, as people know. But I was actually going automatically into this very hyped state that I didn't realise, and adrenaline was flowing, and I wasn't really in between these performances coming down from that. I wasn't doing anything to get my body back down to earth again from cloud 9, and that's the fatal error I made, is that. And if I could have tried to bring myself down into relaxation mode in between these performances, I would then probably be storing up more adrenaline and energy ready for the next performance.
What specific techniques did you use to get you back on track again?
Well, in order for me to come down from that sort of stress state, what I found in the end, actually, that worked for me really well was yoga. A very simple case of yoga, nothing too kind of over the top. I'm not a massive yoga specialist or anything, but I was able to do the real basic kind of yoga, particularly breathing exercises, and also just light physical action in yoga. And I've got to be honest, at the beginning, I thought yoga, not for me at all. I don't know why. I just dismissed it as being something that probably wouldn't suit me and I probably wouldn't work for me. But actually, when I got into it, I really found that immediately my heart calmed down, my stress levels came down. I felt like I was back in my own skin again, whereas before, my mind was up here somewhere, travelling at 100 miles an hour. So it really worked so well for me. And that is what brought me from being into the stress state back into relaxation mode, the sort of healing state, as it's called. So that was great. And also meditation has really been a big aid to me. I use it on my phone as different apps. I also just do some on my own if I feel like I can do it. I've done a couple of courses, very simple courses in it. And so I've learned now how I'm able to do this myself. If I feel myself getting very anxious or stressed, that's exactly what I do. I just turn to one of those methods. And the third thing I would do when I was ill particularly was listen to certain kinds of music. Obviously, being a musician, I couldn't help doing that. So it was interesting, though, what kind of music really suited my mood at the time, because I felt very stressed, as you know. I found that listening to really strong, beautiful melodies, slow, romantic stuff, really helped me. And so I've really enjoyed that in my journey, and I've actually recorded quite a few of them as well. So it's really, I've really taken that as being a big part of my recovery, and I've now gone and shared it really in my recordings.
So what would you say is the difference now, after you've recovered from ME? How are you preparing for performances differently? How are you generally in your whole musical life? How are things now compared to what they were before?
Well, I think first of all, I'm approaching it with a different mindset. I'm totally different now in the way that I think and approach things in my life. I think that is the key thing in my personal case. Because when things come in now, if things are very close together, if somebody's asking me to be in Scotland one day and in London the next day, I realise now I'm not superhuman. I can't make it happen overnight. It's just something that I really have to watch. And I know where my limits are. And I've learned that the hard way, the very hard way. Because obviously in the middle of being ill with ME, sort of about 6 months in, I went back to the stage. I started performing again. I didn't want to lose confidence either. That's important to us as musicians, to keep that confidence really and that stage presence. But what I do now after each performance is I'll do some yoga, I'll do some meditation. That night before going to bed, I'll make sure, even if it's just 10 minutes, and just to make sure that I've really come down from that state, because otherwise your sleep is affected, you're not getting the quality of rest that you need. And the next day, it just trickles into the next day and the next day. And all of a sudden, you've had a week of being in a high stress state. So it's really important for me to do those two things, I think. I'm up there with all those people that feel so passionate about what they do and they love what they do. And they're really perfectionist about it. And I'm not very forgiving on myself at all. But that's one thing I've really learned as well, is that actually nothing's perfect. You cannot get absolutely everything perfect unless you're a machine. It's just not who we are. We're artists and we give of our best, and you're giving all the time. And really, I've learned to soften that side of me.
So take me through a day of a performance. How would you prepare for a performance?
I think just reversing back maybe to the day before the performance, or maybe those days in advance. If I know I've got like a recital, for example, or a concerto or whatever, I will definitely make sure I'm preparing weeks in advance, as musicians would. And then when it comes to the day before the performance, I ease off completely. I just make sure that physically I'm not killing myself. I'm not sort of overdoing things, particularly with where I've come from with my health, obviously. So when it comes to the actual day of performance, what I eat is absolutely paramount. I watch after, that I'm not eating anything that may slow my brain down in that way. I do find carbs sometimes really make me quite sleepy, which is quite common knowledge to most people. And also sugar levels, I watch that a little bit too, because it's okay to have a little spike sometimes of sugar, but in terms of concentrating for an hour and a half recital, you just need something durable. You need something that's going to get you through. So I eat a lot of protein and snacks that really will last longer and help my batteries to keep going, really. On the day, I make sure I don't play too much. I will probably only play about an hour, if that, and just make sure my fingers are warmed up and happy and that I'm comfortable wherever I'm performing. And then, obviously, when it comes to the performance, about half an hour before I start revving up, really, and I think about the music that I'm about to perform, obviously. And really, I'll do lots of things like move physically quite a lot because of the body history I've had. I think this is important for anybody who's a musician. I think it's important to be free physically, and I'll do a lot of stretches and, basically, exercises that loosen my body up a little bit. So, and then when I get to it, I just make sure I breathe. Breathing is the most important thing I could ever say to anyone, really, because if you don't breathe, it comes through in the performance. The musicality will not flow as well. And so breathing is absolutely essential when it comes to performing.
And what would you say are your biggest stresses with performing?
I think my biggest stress is probably the pressure that I put on myself when I'm performing. I think another thing that emerged when I was ill was the physical stress of playing, obviously. So I've taken steps to help me with that. I do get quite a lot of different methods, like a chiropractor looks after me, and also there's an osteopath that looks after me as well. And I make sure that I look after my muscles because I'm in this for the long run. I want to be doing this in 50 years' time. So I think it's really important to be taking care of those aspects now, because I've already put so many hours into it and didn't really do any of this kind of treatment before. So I've let a lot of things build up, and pains and stuff. So it's important to keep on top of it and the maintenance of it.
How is it taking your harp around the world? Is that very stressful for you physically, or do you get help with it a lot?
I'm very fortunate. I have a husband who's in the industry. He's a percussionist, so he's used to moving big things. Our house is full of instruments. And so he, at the moment, and also my parents, really help a lot. And they have done for several years. They've been helping me. I hardly really move the harp now, which sounds a bit spoilt, I know. But I think after what I've been through, I just have to watch what I do, and I have to just be in tip-top shape for when I play, really. But I do move it occasionally now and again. But over the years, it's been a struggle. It has been a struggle because it's such a big instrument to think about and to move around. I've often been in situations, when I was in college, I'd turn up at a gig somewhere in central London. There's nowhere to park. There's nowhere to really leave your harp on its own whilst you go park the car. So things like that are quite a big challenge for harpists. But it's important physically as well. When you're transporting it, I think that doesn't get enough attention in college, really. It's one of those things that we forget. We can actually do injuries to ourselves by doing that. So the more you can be aware of it, the better, and get some help in knowing how to lift properly and how to transport things effectively. When I'm abroad, I'm fortunate I do have some help with different contacts that I've built up over the years. Often they will supply me with a harp. I hire a harp or whatever it takes, really, to get that there. But I'd never actually take my own harp.
What about the pressures of media on you? Because you have a lot of radio and television interviews. How does that impact things in terms of performance stress?
I've been very fortunate to have a really good team of people, a very small team, but very, very good. And one person in particular looks at really how I relate with the media and how that works, a publicist, essentially. I think in terms of performance stress, I think it does have a certain amount of impact on it, because obviously if there's been a lot of publicity around something, or something's been really bigged up and it's it's a high pressured performance in your diary, then obviously if some of the media are invited as well and they review your concerts and different things, that definitely has a little bit of an impact, because you do feel even more pressure then to get it right and that it has to be a certain way. So, but in my mind at the moment, I'm in a place where I'm able to really compartmentalize that, really, and I try to really put it aside, because the experience you have when you're younger and when you get older, that really, it forms a big foundation for you as a performer. And I think something happens where I just literally rely on my experience that it will be okay and that it will be all right.
And what about recordings, which are very different from doing a live performance? How do you find that?
I actually love it to bits. That's one of my favourite things to do, actually. It's up there exactly 50-50 with live performing, because I don't know, I just got a passion for it. I love the whole process, and I've been really fortunate to really work with some really great orchestras, like Linda Mozart players and Chamber Orchestra. The concertos and the solo bits I've recorded, they've been pieces I've always wanted to do. And that feeling when a dream comes true, wow, it's happening, I'm doing it, and this is the moment. I've always really tried to make sure I absorb that moment with everything I have, because especially since I've been ill, I think it's dawned on me quite a lot that actually I need to appreciate every moment, really. And when it comes to the process of recording, I approach it in a really sort of, quite a critical way. I obviously make sure I'm uber prepared for every single bit. And again, experience comes into play. The first time you record, it's a very different experience to the fifth time you record or the sixth time you record. So you learn as you go along. And I've had some great teachers as well in the colleges that have really helped prepare me for that. But no, I think the latest recording that I did after falling ill after ME, that was the real test to see really how I'd be able to cope with stress. When we recorded Journey, I was, I was 18 months after that worst part in 2013 of being ill. So really it was testing my body to the limit, and I knew I was putting myself under quite a lot of pressure to be doing that recording. But there was also something really liberating about it, because I knew if I could get through that and achieve it, then I knew, okay, I'm recovering, I'm getting better, it's positive.
How do you feel when it's all going really well on stage?
It's the best feeling in the world, really, isn't it? When you're performing and it all goes really well, and the audience are shouting or clapping and standing and different things. You get this rush, don't you? You get a really strong adrenaline rush, and it just makes you smile, and it makes me smile on the inside. And I thoroughly believe, I was born to do this, and I love what I do, and I'm really just grateful and blessed that I can be allowed to do that. So, if I can share my music with the world and also share my story, my personal journeys as well, and if that can help people, then I'm absolutely over the moon, and I'm doing what I was put on this earth to do, really.
Claire Jones, thank you very much. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you so much.